1917 is supposedly based in something historical, if not an actual event, then a time period. But do not be fooled by this lie. 1917 is pure fantasy. It is as ridiculous and as much of a fairy tale as something like, say, Inglourious Basterds. Except whereas Bastards fully commits to the fact that it is fantasy, 1917 does not. And yet, it is pure fantasy, a gross nationalist fantasy of what Britain thinks it is. A duo of brave and noble soldiers lost in a post-apocalyptic European hellscape. A nobility that is such that it will cause the death of one of the main characters as he bravely extricates a German fighter pilot from a downed and burning plane only to be killed by the vile, uncivilized, savage Germanic threat. It is important to remind ourselves that it is impossible to apply simple, basic morality to World War I. With the Second World War, because the Nazi threat is so abject and dangerous and inhuman, it's far simpler to apply basic good versus evil logic to that conflict and to those movies. But with the first global conflict, that simply doesn't work. And that's in part what makes it so atrocious. Millions and millions of young men were sent to their grave for what amounts to basically a very aristocratic feud, and it makes it almost impossible to justify their sacrifice, contrary to World War II, where, let's say, Britain represents within Europe the last bastion, the last refuge against Nazi domination. If you look at the last big-budget British war film, which is, in my opinion, far superior, Dunkirk, Christopher Nolan crafted a movie about retreat, about a bunch of frightened young men who are trying anything to get home, to escape, to survive. And it takes the solidarity of a nation, of a people, to bring those boys home. 1917 is not about the war effort as a group. It is about the super soldier, a man who is incredibly brave. Humble, he gives away his medal as he is not fighting for glory. He's extremely generous as he gives away all of his food to the starving French mother and her adopted child. But he's also indestructible, a perfect Christ-like figure complete with a stigma on his left hand as he punctures it against a German barbed wire, and a capacity halfway through the film to basically resurrect from the dead. There's a lot of talk about the technical aspect of the film, and no doubt the film is absolutely gorgeous. But I feel like the way the film is shot is actually a complete misfire. The original idea, of course, is to completely immerse the spectator within the world, within the war. But because the camera floats around on a gimbal or on a technocrane for the entirety of the film, it actually does the complete opposite. It makes everything feel artificial, like Alfonso Cuarón's Gravity, where actually the point of having a floating camera in space actually makes perfect sense. But with this, I would have much preferred if Deakins had gone handheld, if we'd felt the weight of the camera, the struggling, heavy footsteps of the cameraman as he wades through the mud along with the soldiers. There's something profoundly wrong to me in making a film supposedly about the hardship, the dirtiness, the horror of war, and yet having this very slick, incredibly beautiful floating camera straight out of a video game or a perfume commercial. It denies the spectator any point of view, it denies the characters any humanity, and it just makes everything feel extremely artificial. That artificiality is compounded by the geography of the film, which makes no sense and feels like it takes place in an alternate universe. There's a scene, for example, where the main soldier escapes from a ruined village and jumps into a river, which is full of rapids and even has a waterfall. Now, that river could exist if you were in the American West, in Colorado or Arizona, but in the north of France, you would struggle to find anything resembling a river like that. As we know, the Western is all about mythologizing the American West, the frontiersmen, the Western, and the creation of the United States as a nation. And that's an interesting point of comparison because, in my opinion, this does something very similar. It takes a true historical period but crafts something that is completely fictional and completely fake. And considering the global political climate that we're living in right now, that amounts for me as something that's both stupid and gross, if not actually kind of dangerous. And you know what? I really wouldn't be surprised if Nigel Farage really loved 1917. So as always, thank you very much for watching the video. Please be sure to hit the like button if you like the review, subscribe if you're new, and until next time, see ya.